Today is July the 12th, 2020. Yesterday we began a study of the end times and had part one yesterday. And so I want to continue that today. We went to the book of Daniel, chapter 9, verse 27. I want to read that to you again this morning. It says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate." Boy, that verse is just so full, and that's kind of the backbone of all end time prophecy. And so now, let's look at what we learned yesterday. Number one, there's a man, and he will come and make a covenant or a treaty with many people for a 7-year period. Now, we talked about a week. It's not a week of days, a week of years. I'll show you that today. There's a week of years. And the people he made the treaty with, the covenant with, many people, and part of that will be with the Jews. They will build their temple back. They will start their worship back. And in the middle of this week, 3.5 years later, he's going to do something. He's going to cause their worship to stop. Now, for the first 3.5 years, the Jews will think that he is the greatest thing that's ever lived, because he's made it possible for them to build their temple back, start their worship back, to live in peace, and they will think that he just is a wonderful, wonderful person. But in the middle of the week, that is 3.5 years after it starts, then he's going to come and he's going to stop their worship. And so you can't worship like that anymore. Now then, then it goes on to speak in that verse about abomination. Abomination is something that is vile, detestable, repulsive. And this thing that is so vile, so detestable, will cause desolation. Desolation, of course, it simply means empty. And the rest of the verse says, under the consummation. Otherwise, this is going to wind things up. Consummation will be the finish. This last 3.5 years is going to wind things up. This will be the end of it. Now then, I want to show you in chapter 12, verse 11 of Daniel. It says there, "And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away." Now we know that sacrifice is taken away in the middle of the week, 3.5 years after it starts, the sacrifice will be taken away. "And the abomination that maketh desolate set up." All right, this abomination, this thing that's so repulsive, will be set up. I want you to get that, set up. Something is set up. All right? "There will be 1,290 days." If you figure it out, that's 3.5 years. So there's going to be 3.5 years. So that's not a week of days, that's a week of years. Now then, we need to go over to the book of Matthew, where Jesus was speaking, and see what he says. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 15 says, this is Jesus speaking now, "When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand." All right? You understand, because we've talked about this. He is talking about the exact same scripture that we just read in the book of Daniel, about the abomination that makes desolate. And he says here that it is going to stand in the holy place, that is, in the temple. So this abomination, this detestable thing, is going to take place in the temple, in the holy place, by this man. Now then, when Jesus goes on the next few verses and says, when you see this happen, get out of town, leave. He says, when you hear this is happening, or this has happened, He said, if you're out in the field, don't go back into town. He said, run, take off. Because at that point, this man is going to try to annihilate the Jews. Now then, in verse 21 of chapter 24, it says, for then, when is then? When the abomination of desolation is set up in the holy place. Then, that's 3.5 years after it starts, then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world at this time, no, nor ever shall be. Now, we hear many people say that the whole 7-year period is the tribulation period, but there's nowhere in the Bible that says the whole 7 years is tribulation, only the last 3.5 years. From the time the abomination of desolation is set up in the holy place until the end, that 3.5 years will be the great tribulation period. Much of it is discussed and talked about in the book of Revelation. Well, time's up for today. We'll have to stop here for today, and we'll start back with part 3 tomorrow. I hope you have a fantastic day today.